people have asked me, look, why do you talk about things like private planes or wearing a $1,200 hoodie or drinking a $5,000 bottle of wine? And people say it's like so stupid, you shouldn't be talking about that. I said, well, look, let's just step back. If you accept that writing is an art, I certainly believe it is, at least as far as, and you accept that I'm not altogether stupid. You don't have to say I'm smart, but accept that I'm not altogether stupid. Just realize that I made a conscious choice there.
Hello, my friend. Welcome to Bold Conscious Connections. My name is Raju Panjwani, and I'm just thrilled to have you here. So this channel is dedicated to exploring the journeys of visionary leaders, entrepreneurs, who really dared to follow their dreams, their passions, and create really impactful businesses. So if you're looking to become an entrepreneur or otherwise seeking inspiration to elevate your career, well, you're in the right place, my friend. Let me say, why do I do this? It's because, like you, I had a career over 25 years, and at some point, my desire to follow my own path just took over, and I quit my job about 20 years ago now. So on this channel, what I do is we delve into strategies, mindsets, stories behind the success of those that have done this before, like I have. So what I want you to do is hit the subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and join us on this exciting journey towards living boldly and consciously. Oh my God, this has been a long time coming. My friend Alok, we've known each other for, 30 years now, Alok. Alok Sama just issued his first book, The Money Trap. He's a former president and CFO of SoftBank Group International. He previously served as one of my colleagues at Morgan Stanley, managing director, and he was a well-known investment banker. Worked in finance for over 30 years. He's an MBA from Wharton School and an MFA recently in creative writing at NYU. The Money Trap is his first book. Welcome to the show, Alok.
Thanks, Rajiv. It's good to be reunited with old friends.
Yes, to think it was 30 years ago that I first met you at the what used to be the Oberoi Towers at Morgan Stanley.
Yeah, I think it might have been even before that, because you used to be, as I recall, hovering around the trading floor at Morgan Stanley in my days over there. So I think it was even further than that. We didn't know each other then, but we got to know each other a little bit better in Mumbai. Yeah.
Well, good. So your book is a delightful read. This is how I read books, as I just showed you before. I was, literally juicing it up, man. It was so good. It's like literally very high quality read. It's like a literary writing. I think you've done your musings on, different platforms in the past, articles here and there. And I always used to say, man, you should be writing something. And I'm sure that was a calling. And so I'm glad that you're a fellow writer, but you're in a different category, my friend. So
you're too kind.
So listen, the first question I always ask is, leaving aside all that, you've done and the accolades, CFO of and SoftBank and much more and all of that stuff, but who is Alok Sama?
Oh, man. I still trying to figure it out. That's not a facetious answer. I really mean it. So let me answer it in a roundabout way. I did an interview with the Economic Times, which is very personal. And she asked me in her rapid fire round, what song would you pick? Because my book, as you will have observed, is littered with musical references. So, look, what song would you pick to characterize Alok Sama? Mm-hmm. And my spontaneous response was a Supertramp song. It was a huge hit from way back when. You'll probably know it, the Logical Song. And if you remember that song, the punchline is, won't you please tell me who I am? Which is a roundabout way of coming to, it's the whole cliche of life's a journey, et cetera, et cetera. I've kind of rediscovered myself so many times over that I actually don't know what to believe anymore. I started off, as I relate in my book, there's a bit of an origin story going back to my days in the college when I was this geeky mathematician, and I thought that was my calling, and I thought that's who I was. And purely in many ways, I feel my life has been a series of mostly fortunate accidents and kind of stumbled into doing an MBA at the Wharton School, and then stumbled into this job at Morgan Stanley. You remember Morgan Stanley? It was as waspy as it gets back then, right? I mean, handful of Indians. I happened to make an impression on one of them, Bidyut Sen, who you might
Oh, I know him very well.
remember,
Yeah.
right? So that was my entree into banking. So who I am, literally, I was consumed by this money, 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 hot shit investment banker. I became at that point probably the worst version of myself, but I own it, man. I mean, that's who I was.
Yeah.
And then I went through a process where I checked out, got my head out of my proverbial ass, so to speak. And by the way, I don't believe anyone actually hangs up from, kind of checks out. I don't want to sound as if I'm like the monk who gave up the Ferrari or whatever.
Right. Mhm.
I was forced out, kind of the bubble burst. And I was in that situation
Mhm.
where I was one of the highest compensated bankers in London, and went very quickly from being that to becoming a target. That's what happens on Wall Street when money gets tight. So,
Yep. Yep.
and then I had to kind of reinvent myself, play around with being an entrepreneur, and didn't really want to do this SoftBank thing, but got persuaded to do it in a
Yes.
bizarre way, not by money, but kind of driven as much by a desire to impress my kids, my son in particular, which you as a parent, I think, will relate to, right? I think
Yeah, we all crave somebody's love, one of the parents or and your
well,
kids too.
love, I'd like to think you never take it
Yeah.
for granted, but
Yeah.
kind of you'd like to think that's a given.
Yeah.
It's more a kind of it's a little bit shallower, but a desire to think your kids are cool, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Of
And
course.
if you got a son who's doing a little bit of what you've done, only think you've done it better than any of his bosses, you kind of feel
Mhm.
like you need to. So there's a little bit of that, but candidly, coming back to where I am, who I am, I think I really do feel I'm living my best life in
Yeah.
terms of, I've always lived in my head, and the idea that I can legitimately, that's kind of my calling. That is what I'm doing, which is living in my head, which is I'm reading books, I'm thinking about books, and I'm thinking about what to write and what to write next. That feels like who I am, but hey, that might change 5 years down the road.
Well, I've been accused as well, Alok, of living in my head too long, and most of
Yeah,
my last, I would say, 10 years have been spent dipping into my heart. Because not
yeah,
to say that we're all heartless, but I
yeah,
think we identify too much with our careers and what we do as opposed to who
yeah,
we are. So who
yeah.
we are is a discovery, but
Well said.
ultimately you can
Well
sit
said.
there
Yeah,
and put a
yeah,
label on it. But I'm always curious to hear what people have to say about
yeah,
about who
yeah,
they are. So,
yeah.
I mean, I have to say that the first thing I read on most books is the acknowledgments. So I
Right.
go to the back of the book,
Interesting.
and
Okay.
it shows how grateful you are
Hmm.
and who you acknowledge and what you do. And it's like such a beautiful. You write so it's pithy writing, and it's like
Yeah,
punchy, and it's like beautiful storytelling, and how you say it. It's, I mean, I'm certainly it's not the only book I read, but you're like really amazing. So
yeah.
the acknowledgments of your fellow students and your professors and your recent writing. So it leads me to ask one question. I'm always curious about why people write what they write. So there was a story to tell, as you say in the back, and through probably your MFA creative writing, it came out that this story had to be told.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so why do you think this story had to be told?
So, as I say in that acknowledgement section, Raju, I didn't go to. People assume I went to the MFA program with the intention of writing a memoir, writing this book, and that's actually not the case at all.
That's right.
In fact, my last thing I wanted to do was to write some type of executive memoir. Maybe because I don't read executive memoirs. I mean, candidly, I'll say it anyway. I should say this, but I'll say it anyway. I mean, I read John Mack's memoir, and man, it was terrible, right? I mean, and it's like literally the only reason I read it is I'm an ex-Morgan Stanley guy. It's just not interesting. That like self-congratulatory, like, oh my God, man, I
Mhm.
killed it. I mean, dude,
Yeah.
we don't need that. So,
Yeah.
and that's what a lot of senior executives tend to do. It's kind of self-aggrandizing. It's settling scores. And I just didn't want to go there because that's what
Mhm.
people assume is going to happen in a memoir.
Right.
And the only reason I was persuaded to do it is, and memoirs, if it starts with like, I grew up in India and I was poor and I became rich and blah, 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 that becomes really boring too. That's really cliched, right? I just figured that, look, man, I mean, that 6 year, 5 year slice of life, so much happened for me. And it wasn't just professional, right? I mean, And you'll appreciate this. I mean, both my kids graduated from college. Some of what you go through when kids go to college, when they graduated from college. I lost both my parents within this period of 111 days, which I talk about. I lost
Yep.
both my parents and my dog. That was intense. And I had this amazing up and down journey
Sure.
professionally at SoftBank, where I just saw so much go down and met with some really interesting people all over the world, ranging from, Narendra Modi, for example, to Mark Zuckerberg and what have you. They said, look, I mean, there's just a lot to unpack. And if I can
Yes.
write it and make it read like a novel, which is what I wanted to write, by the way. I wanted to
Yes.
write
I mean,
fiction. I
it
said,
really reads like a novel. It's
yeah,
incredible. And it's like,
yeah.
literary writing. And I hope you win a Pulitzer Prize for it. Yeah. I really
It's
do.
interesting. It would be cool to get a Pulitzer or get it someone bestseller list. But here's the thing, and I mean this sincerely, I really do. What's been really, really cool to me is I am flooded. Every morning I look forward to this and I keep on looking at it and it's very addictive and it's not healthy. But what I'm looking at is not sales numbers or whatever. I just keep on getting messages from people and they keep on talking about. And the amazing thing is that people, because the book was launched simultaneously in India, in the UK, and the US. So
Hmm.
I'm getting messages from I can tell by his name, is a Sikh in Ludhiana who's read this book. And he sends me scribbled down neatly a list of 150 new words he's learned from the book. Can you
I
believe
know.
that? I'll share this with you. I think I shared that on I might have. I think I might
Sure.
have. It was actually on Twitter or on X, and I shared it,
Mhm.
it's just amazing. And then I
Yeah.
get this message from a gentleman who is, I won't name him because he's well known. And, he's one of he's a Wall Street titan, right? I mean, I get another message from, chairman of a Silicon Valley company. I get messages from people who school, college, tons of Morgan Stanley people. And they're all like, man, the way you described it, that scene in St. Stephen's College Cafe or a Morgan Stanley at Canary Wharf, it was exactly like that. It was,
Yeah.
that's been really, really cool. And part of what I was discussing this with Maya, I read a lot. I assume you do too. It's
Oh,
just never occurred to me after I've enjoyed a book or found something that really moves me to reach out and engage with the writer and just email him. And why are people doing this with me? And I guess what to me, and this is what I've found about where I'm getting at. To me, what really means a lot is I've succeeded in communicating with people in a way that makes them feel that they know me, that I'm a friend,
sure.
that they can actually reach out to Alok and because they know Maya, they know Samir, they know my parents. It's like it's an open book out there. It literally is an open book, right? So
Yes, it
they
is.
feel they can reach out. So to me, that's been really, really cool, really rewarding.
That's beautiful. So anyway, I
Yeah,
read 5 books a month, but I'm
yeah.
telling you that this is near the top of my list now for, for recommending people. So,
Thank you.
really well done. So it's very touching. So going back to, I was trying to say, 'cause there's so many things in the book and do I want to talk about the book all day, but now I want to talk about Alok here. But
Yeah,
I do
sure.
want to read through a couple of your, 'cause by the way, I have a pretty good vocabulary, but I just had to look up, I think 5 words. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
will
Okay.
also admit to that.
I'm disappointed because I don't think I've used that many. I mean, the
You,
comments from my friend in Ludhiana notwithstanding, I don't think there were that many words that needed to be looking up.
well, maybe it's from Ludhiana, man. Okay. Listen, biceps are the male cleavage. This is your son saying. Oh, I couldn't stop laughing. My goodness.
Yeah.
Daddy, you do need to do something about your arms.
Yeah.
Another one was some people start off on the wrong foot. I start off on the wrong seat. Oh my God, that was like hilarious. And
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
have to read the book to figure out what that
What
means
that wrong
and why.
seat was.
And being a golfer, you are, and I'm an avid golfer too. But in the part where you mentioned you're in Asia playing around, and I've had the experience of playing in Phuket. So here we are. You realize your role was limited to swinging.
Exactly.
In-flight exhortations of the golf ball, celebration admonishments, etc., were all part of caddies' duties.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, literally, this book is full of so much self-deprecating humor as well, and
Yeah.
the stuff about wine. I love wine. I'm a student of wine, so for me, it's like, oh, this is. I was soaking it all up. So anyway, but I'm curious about the quieter periods in between the moments when you were in the midst of, doing these deals or pivotal decision that you might have been making for those. What do those moments of silence teach you about you? Because I know you've reflected a lot and you still reflect. And what part of your identity has been most challenging to reconcile across these different sort of phases of your life?
The two things. One of the things I've struggled with is maybe struggle is too strong a word, but this thing about kind of the how Indian am I, how connected am I, and you and I were a little bit fortunate in as much as, despite our careers in the financial markets on Wall Street, we kind of reconnected with India professionally through
Mhm.
our time at Morgan Stanley. But kind of one of the things I struggled with when I came to this country, which everyone does, is you need to integrate. I think the need to do that is a lot less now. People change their names. The accent becomes very American. A Vikram always becomes a Vic, and so on and so
Yeah, yeah,
forth, right? And we've seen that. You've seen that among, kind of politicians these days, right?
sure,
With
sure.
Nikki Haley and Bobby Jindal and what have
Yes.
you, right? But let's not go there. And I don't mean that in the sense of judgment. I mean, there is, when you come to this country, the pressure to assimilate is quite intense. And I became quite American. And then obviously then I left this country, which becomes a little bit confusing. I'm a UK citizen now.
Sure.
And the UK tends to be a little bit easier in terms of London anyway. I shouldn't say the UK because there's London and then there's the rest of the country,
Right.
just the way there's New York and San Francisco and
Yeah.
then there's the rest of America. And I think we're
Mhm.
all more acutely aware of that probably than any time in recent memory. So,
Yeah.
you feel like a bit of a chameleon. I did the stint in Hong Kong, which became very Chinese too, right? So
Sure.
that has always been a constant, a bit of a moving target. And I capture some of that in my book. There's this moment which I don't know if you picked up on, and maybe you'll relate to, where I go meet with Narendra Modi, right?
Yeah. Certainly.
And for me, I grew up in Delhi, and whatever one thinks of Modi, and I don't want to go there into a political discussion. For me, it's like for the first 20 years of my life, I might have gone to Bombay once or twice, maybe to like Shimla or Nainital or whatever, but I hadn't been anywhere really, right? So
Mhm.
it's like still, kind of reading my prime minister. This is still my hometown. So I go there, like, bow, do a deep kind of deep bow, namaste, respectful. And he kind of ignores that and just sticks his hand out, firm handshake, and kind of make you feel as if like, okay, I see myself in a certain way, but the way he sees me, the way he's been briefed is, I'm this British American banker wearing a fancy Italian suit and a tie, and
Mhm.
that's kind of what I am. And in his mind, I needed to be, he looks at me in a certain way and treats me in a certain way. So
Sure.
that's one theme to unpack. And the other theme to unpack for me, which was cathartic to kind of put out there, is my relationship with my parents. I don't think I really believe as a writer, you tell stories and you let people take away their own thing, in
Sure.
terms of what means or what resonates to them. And I sometimes feel if I'm talking to a group of younger people, what I want them to take away is most certainly not how to get rich or whatever, because, so much of that is serendipity. It's little things like, hey kids, call your mother more often, right? I
Mhm.
mean, if you've
Yeah.
come to this country and you've left parents behind, in my day, there was at least a bit of an excuse. You'll remember this, like AT&T calling cards to America, man. I mean,
Yeah.
kind of those things, call
Sure.
to India cost a fortune, right?
Fortune.
These
Yeah.
days,
Yeah.
it's like you have no excuse, man. I mean,
Yeah.
just call your
Yeah.
parents more often.
That's
It's
right.
things like that. These are things that are relatable, and I think that's a little bit of why the book resonates with people,
Sure.
even if it's got nothing to do with finance. So those are some of the things that I try to unpack. I don't really fully do justice to either, because that's when the commercial overlay from the publisher comes in, which is
Yeah.
like, dude, this is supposed to be a business book. Let's not lose
Right.
sight of that, right? So that's a
Okay.
roundabout way of answering your question.
Well, so anyway, this podcast, as you know, is about, my listeners tend to be people who are midlife,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you talk about
yeah,
that in the book.
yeah.
We've all been through the cycle of life, losing parents, empty nester syndrome, etc. So this is really should be right dead center in this, zone of what we're talking about. So let's talk about illusions, though, in this context. So, you undoubtedly seen many illusions in your life, whether it's in markets or leadership. What personal illusion did you carry for the longest time, and what happened with it, and how did you confront it?
Yeah, I mean, it gets to the title of the book, which is the money trap, right? I
Mhm.
mean, and this illusion,
I mean, you end the book with
just
that too, as far as, we're
it
all
is,
chasing money.
and there's a reason for that. And that is to the degree there's a message, and there's one review that picked up on like maybe that is the message of the book, and
Yes.
frankly, from my perspective, it is, and it's this recurring motif of money as a pathway to happiness, which is
Mhm.
just so common, a little bit cliched, so relatable because everyone accepts it and piles onto it. Other people just reject it. And I didn't want to be didactic in any way. I just wanted to put my experience out there. I mean, I
Sure.
think for
Sure.
me, the other thing that is being pointed out to me frequently as a criticism, and this is actually really interesting to unpack. People have asked me, look, why do you talk about things like private planes or wearing a $1,200 hoodie or drinking a $5,000 bottle of wine? And people say it's like so stupid, you shouldn't be talking about that. I said, well, look, let's just step back. If you accept that writing is an art, I certainly believe it is, not to
Mhm.
suggest I'm an artist, but I'm a learner, but I believe it is, at least as far as, and you accept that I'm not altogether stupid. You don't have to say I'm smart, but accept that I'm not altogether stupid. Just realize that I made a conscious choice there, right?
Yes. Yes.
I could not have written about any of that. And I completely get that, particularly in this day and age, that if I don't talk about flying private or drinking $5,000 bottles of wine or, wearing whatever, that makes people like me less. I get that. So the fact that I'm putting it out there, knowing you're not going to like me, I'm doing that for a reason. One is I want to be completely honest with you. I mean, I had a chat with Hari Kunzru, who's one of my writing gurus, and
Sure.
I asked him how I deal with it. And his two-word response was, own it. And he
On it.
didn't have to say anything more. I completely understood, which is you want to be honest with people. You don't want to sell people on yourself, right? You want to make it a book as if you're trying to sell yourself to readers because people are, smart readers is the only ones you care about. People see right through that. The second thing is if I mention those things, it's never in the spirit of voyeurism, right? Some people kind of, for them, like, okay, just the experience describing private is cool, but I usually whenever I do that with a reason. I'll give you the example of flying private. I talk about I don't know if you dog eared that section of the
Okay.
book. I'm talking about flying private.
Yes.
And I describe the experience and how it went to my head and I feel like
Sure.
Jagger and how cool it is. And it really is cool. And I miss
Yeah.
it. I'll say it out there and put it out there. My wife, Maya, by the way, ultimate socialist, ultimate anti-consumer. Everything I say in the book is completely true. The
Yeah.
first time she flew private with me was like, this is cool. But here's the thing. I say that, and then the punchline in that section is as cool as this awesome plane, Viper, the G5,
Yeah.
Gulfstream G650, this is the G550 is a hand-me-down from my boss because he's got a G650, right?
That's right.
And this gig of there's always something bigger, flies faster, lasts longer. I mean, that is just a recipe for permanent unhappiness. You fall in that trap, it just never stops.
Yep.
So to me, that's the one point I really wanted to get across. I was at Wharton yesterday and, I kind of said, look, I mean, this is the Wharton School. Let's get granular. Let's talk numbers, right? I mean, everyone has this notion of an FU number and you set it and then you hit it. And then like for 50 different reasons, you up it, or even if you think you've hit it, you just can't break free because you think, even
Sure.
though when you sort of know it's making you unhappy. So that to
Yep.
me is it's a little bit cliched, but I still think it's so important to talk about because everyone kind of falls into that trap. And it is an illusion. It really is.
Well, that's for me. As long as you're being honest with yourself, whether it's a $5,000 bottle, you also see the contrast, right? So where you came from, we all came with, I came $8 in my pocket. You had
Right.
500 travelers
Yeah.
checks, whatever you say,
Yeah.
and then you ride the wave and you're up and up,
Because
and
they
then
changed the rules on Farah, by the way. When you came out, you have a few years on me. I think when you came, the limit was $8 and they upped it to
no,
500.
no, no. My father had no money, had no
Yeah.
money.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it was
Yeah.
500 rupees or some ridiculous number. So it was like,
Right. Right.
or 200
Right.
rupees. It was like eight,
Yeah.
$8. So anyway, the
Right.
point is that we rode the wave and we rode it, and people like me go down and up and all this kind of stuff, kind of
Yeah.
stuff in our lives. So that's okay. And I had this FU number too. Like I would get this and I would become an entrepreneur. even while you met, I was like, for me, it's like, I couldn't wait to become an entrepreneur. And I don't talk about this in the book as much, but it's really crazy. Well, we have this, when this, then I will do this, when this, and I'll do this. And then you come to that thing and the realizations either last 6 minutes, your promotion lasts you maybe a couple of weeks of joy. And then like, now what? Now what's going to happen? Bigger responsibility, more money maybe, but then what, right? So that's the endless chase and the mirage. And I just keep writing articles about all these things. By the way, every week I have a newsletter article that goes out with these sort of things. So I think we're on the same page with that. So I like the fact that you say like $5,000 bottle of wine, but then there's also the contrast, right? So
exactly.
So we often talk about success and failure in the context. What about the tipping points that force transformation, Alok? And I'm talking about personal transformation. Looking back, was there a moment or two when you realized that you fundamentally changed somehow, not because you wanted to, but because you had to?
I think that for me, it was,
and I'm not talking about the book now. So
no, well, it's in the book because I mean the book's a memoir, and it's not talking about personal tipping points in my memoir. That's I'm not going to talk about. So you got to bring the book into it because it's very much in there. For me, the turning point really was again, it's a bit of a cliche, but I have to say it. I mean, cliches become cliches for a reason, right? Because there is a reason a certain way of saying things resonate with people, right? And so for me, just that whole life's too short message and, kind of don't make any more excuses. You got to do what you got to do in terms of, any kind of things that you don't want to go to your grave, like thinking I had this bug inside me where I could have been a good writer. Maybe I can be a great writer. I got to give this a fair chance, right?
Yes.
I got to do it. I've been thinking about this for a long time, just taking the plunge. So for me, that was really call it a tipping point, if you will. It was a big deal. I mean, look, it's, at our age going into school, I was older than all of my professors. And I mean that. I mean, because I never discussed age with the students because they were all same age as my kids, right? I mean, typical profile was mid to late 20s, and both my kids my daughter was the same age, 29 now, my son's 31 now. So the profs were all, the older ones were in their 50s, 40s, 50s, and I was older than all of them. And it was just throwing myself into that environment, a lot of insecurities, a lot of vulnerability. Am I mentally, physically going to be? It's a demanding full-time master's program. You got to churn out stuff. You got to be graded, all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
And if you come from India, I got this quickly, but at least going in, I had this like, oh my God, am I going into a course? I got to get A's, man. I mean, whatever you do, you can't lose that feeling. It's this feeling like someone's always waiting you. Yeah. And of course, NYU, that writing program, it's this American thing. And, this is as, it's NYU is as liberal as it gets. And nobody's supposed to think about grades, et cetera, et cetera. I got to tell you, I couldn't let that go. So I had to, those A's, I was probably the only one in that class where the A's meant something to me, even if everyone else got A's. But that process was not easy. It was a big commitment. It was a lot of work, but man, I loved every minute of it. I mean, it was just
that's great.
So it was so amazing as an educational experience. And I really, really worked very hard through that 3-year period on my book, most of all.
Mm-hmm. So you talk beautifully about your parents' relationships with you and all the things that you regret and not having done, etc. And I'm not going to go through that here. But also, as we discussed earlier, your son's in New York at the time, and you're calling him, and moments of where you think that, the empty nester. Now you keep talking about empty nester a few times in the book.
Yeah.
I know that I've had 4 kids. Empty nester. I'm solo right now.
Right.
But if a money trap is about exposing the financial, allure and pitfalls of that, have you sought personal redemption in the years since, the last few years? I mean, is there something you're still seeking closure or healing on? I know your rock is Maya. Of course, she's amazing right there with you.
No, I mean, like I said, I really mean this, and I mean this from a perspective of gratitude. My life really has been a series of mostly fortunate accidents. And I've had a few setbacks, but Raju, nothing what I know you've experienced at a personal level. So I've been really fortunate in that regard. And, I've done good things, I've done bad things, but nothing that makes me feel I need, I think redemption is way too strong a word. All I can say is I'm in a good place. I have the fortunate luxury of doing what I really like doing on my own terms. and which really is to write. I think this process of selling a book is a little tedious, and I don't mean conversations like this because it's like you and I talking and we're old friends. But some of what I need to do is really does get quite tedious. So I'm keen to kind of break free of that and start doing not that I've stopped doing, but really spend my time on writing more, and kind of so far so good.
So for those listening or watching, our viewers or listeners, the inspiration's about I'm sitting on the fence in the corporate executive job. I'm done politicking. I'm done, boss is changing on me, but I got to go find to do something in my life.
Yeah.
What would you say is a lesson for them?
I think that it is, if you're like cruise control, you're doing well, you're happy, you're not going to break through, even if you've got this. I mean, candidly, I look at SoftBank, if Nikesh Arora had been around and he'd become CEO and I was by his side, never mind that I want to write and I've made enough money and I don't need it and I don't care about money or power, which I mean sincerely, I genuinely don't. I would still have been, I don't even want to call it a rut because I would have been happy. I would not have broken away. So to me, the key really is there probably are pivotal moments, times of change, some upheaval. You're working for a company and your company gets taken over, or you have a new boss, or your business is disruptive and you need to, kind of re-energize. I mean, kind of use those moments to not just kind of go with the flow, whatever's happening, whether it's a change in roles or change in jobs or change in bosses or merging with a company or whatever. It's like, just like, okay, is this an opportunity to break free? Because if this is not what's making me happy, or there's a bug I've got, whether I want to be an artist, an architect, a visual artist, an architect, or a poet, man, I mean, just go out and do it. And at least so far, it's working for me. Time will tell. Working in the sense that I've written something that is at least getting, well, it's got really good reviews too, fortunately, touch wood. But candidly, as much as I care about reviews, and I do care, it's impossible not to. Any writer who tells you that, I don't read reviews is like, I don't actually buy it. It's been really, really rewarding. So I would really encourage people to, based on my limited experience, is like, even if it hadn't gotten a great reception, I've been through enough setbacks in the world of business that I would have kept at it. So the important thing is, like, if something you want to do, if there's a break point, re-examine and go for it.
Yeah. So ultimately we talk about comfort zones. And the thing is, if you're not, I mean, you did this, we all do this when you're going through college. It's not easy, but if you want to go for those A's and be the master, you struggle through it and you figure it out, right?
Right.
So in life, if something is burning inside of you, I say, it's also the desire has been placed in you by some force that you don't know what it is, whether it's to be a writer or to be an entrepreneur or to do whatever.
Yeah.
So my audience hopefully is unfulfilled in their careers and want to do something that's uniquely theirs. So that's what I'm asking them to, or having my guests talk about inspiration to say, don't sit in your comfort zone, because all possibilities are on the other side, not in your comfort zone.
Yeah, and the only thing I'm acknowledging is I'm sympathetic with people who sit in the comfort zone. In all honesty, I will tell you, I am not one of those people who, like possibly many of you out there, who had the courage to break out of the comfort zone. Comfort zones, by definition, are not easy to break out of. That's what they're comfort zones.
But they're comfort zones, yes.
So you've really got to wait for those break points. And my only point is, not to belabor it, is if there is a break point, use that as an opportunity. There's an opportunity in every crisis, right? And that to me is the only thing I'd pass on.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about unseen battle with fear. I don't know if you had any fears. I'm sure you do. We did. Health being one, this, that, the other. Anyway, so high achievers often carry a certain fear that they don't reveal, whether it's fear of irrelevance or failure or personal collapse of some sort, whatever those words are. So don't take them literally. What has been your longest held fear, and how have you wrestled with, even now, perhaps? I don't know.
I guess at a personal level, it's just plain. It's as simple as growing old and becoming irrelevant. And going old and all the limitations that means in terms of not being able to do all the things I love doing, whether it's playing golf or working out or sex for that matter. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's a long list. And, so far, so good, I have to say, but that is a fear. And I talk about this in my book. I mean, I take these ridiculous pills pay $129 a month to subscribe. I really shouldn't give them a bad rep, so I won't name the company. But they do this genetic test for you,
Yeah.
which is supposed to show you theoretically how taking these pills is reducing your cellular age. And in my case, my cellular age is kept on after I started taking the pills. It went up. And I can't tell you which is stupider, kind of the fact that they sell these pills or the fact that people like me keep taking them. I still keep taking them. I still keep paying for them. I still haven't gotten over that, to be quite honest. I haven't overcome it. So I don't have any prescriptions, but I struggle with that. That remains a fear.
Right.
And at a professional level, kind of being relevant, you check out of a high-powered job
Mm-hmm.
where your opinion counted for a lot, all of a sudden it doesn't. I find it really intriguing that somehow writing a book has made me relevant in ways that are kind of ironic and borderline comical. I mean, I get on CNBC and people ask me about Nvidia stock, and the next day I get a message from a friend of mine. It says, "Alok, should I buy Nvidia stock?" And I said, like, dude, you think I know what I'm talking about? I'm really undermining myself, but it's
Oh,
like,
that's good.
please don't listen to anything I say. People assume because I've written a book or because I'm CNBC, I actually know. And in many ways, I'm just highlighting for you the danger. This gets really nihilist, and I have to
Sure.
say this of listening to everyone, kind of
Mm-hmm.
who comes on board with any kind of self-proclaimed expertise in a particular field and suggests you do
Sure.
this and that, which is why since I'm very cynical when it comes to my own book, I always say, look, man, I'm just putting my experience out there.
Sure.
There will be people who read this book and probably the younger generation who will say, oh man, I want to be like this guy. I want to
Uh-huh.
be rich. I want to fly private. I want to make that money. This is so cool. Right. And there will be others who will say, yeah, I mean, like, look at what this guy did. And is there a alternative version of Alok that
Yeah.
would have been happier if he put his life, put his energy and whatever talents, brains, energy, and in a different direction? And in many ways, that's the more important question to ask. I don't know the answer, but
Yeah.
kind of, it's the key is to put those questions out there and people find their own answers.
Yep. Happiness for everyone. What a contrast.
Yeah, exactly.
For those who don't know what I'm talking about, just read the book. So, you lived a life driven by power, high intellect, razor sharp decision making. Alok, how do you find? This podcast is about bold and conscious. So bold, you
Yeah.
definitely are. We already know that. How do you find space for introspection, emotional depth, spiritual grounding, just something that keeps you grounded every day, so that you do things that are important to you?
One thing that has really helped me is my mind. A lot of people say this, but I just wonder if they're as messed up as I am. I mean, there's just always so much going on in my head. So one practice that has really helped me is to meditate. And,
Mm-hmm.
I meditate twice a day in the morning. I wish I could say first thing in the morning, but I'm as screwed up as everyone else. What I do first thing in the morning, it used to be in my working days, I check and see if any messages from us and so on. And these days, it's invariably checking on my Goodreads rating for my book and see if anyone's left me nice reviews. So, but I do meditate in the morning and in the evening. That
Mm-hmm.
for me has been a very healthy discipline. I am an atheist, so I can't claim but I completely understand the sense of community and the peace of mind that people get out of religion. I mean, just too logical
Yeah.
to have kind of given into that as a crutch, but I totally get how it's a very powerful crutch. So for me, meditation is very helpful. Family, my wife in particular, really keeps me grounded. I mean, that's been
Mm-hmm.
fundamental to me. We've been together almost 40 years, and
Awesome.
that's been extraordinary for me in terms of keeping me grounded and kind of
Sure.
keeping, kind of the sentiments, the things that we need to remind ourselves every day,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the gratitude for all we have. And
Yep.
man, it's all relative. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
life's been good to me so far.
Okay. All right. So, last question on the book before we get to rapid fire,
Yeah.
which you agreed to, right?
Do I have a choice? I'm sure it'll be fun.
Okay. In writing the book, you no doubt had to leave certain stories out. Of course, you have to go
Yeah.
through editors, and you're being published. You have a publisher. So, but was there a particular experience or lesson that did make it into the book, but you still found it profoundly shaped who you are or in your journey, what it became.
No, I mean, candidly, if I'd done that, that would have been a dishonest book because the whole idea of the memoir is to put in everything that really matters. And I would have found a way to weave it in the context of a 6-year narrative. But I'll tell you the one thing about this book, and it's sort of interesting to talk about, my inspiration, when I said, okay, I'm going to write a memoir, once I got over that, my inspiration was a book that I don't expect anyone in your podcast to have read. And if they have and they enjoyed it, I'd love to meet them because I think we connect at a different level. It's a book called The Rings of Saturn by a German writer called Winfried Siebold. And he died relatively young at age 48 in a car accident, but he wrote 3 unbelievable books. He talked to people in the literary community. They would have said that's one of the things that makes this idea that Nobel Prizes shouldn't be given to people who have passed away or shouldn't be given posthumously is kind of a joke.
Yeah.
But that book is about a writer who is on a walking tour of on Suffolk in the eastern coast of England, northeastern coast of England. And it's about what he sees, people he meets, and streams of consciousness that come as a result of that. That's a book that is, because it's not like a clean story, it's streams of consciousness, kind of, I had to deal with that. But I forced my editor to give me the leeway to meander a little bit. And I'll give you an example. I mean, I talk about, we don't need to get into the technical details of this because it won't be relevant to a lot of your listeners. I do talk about this gargantuan, world changing for the financial world anyway, the SoftBank Vision Fund, which is $100 billion, largest pool of capital ever assembled. And when I introduced that SoftBank Vision Fund, the first 2 pages of that chapter are talking about Teddy Roosevelt shooting animals in Africa. And there's a lot to unpack there. Why am I talking about this? And, this idea of, there's 2 ideas I'm trying to unpack. One is I never completely got this, kind of American fascination with guns. When I first came to this country, West Philadelphia, it was like war zone, right? And I saw a lot of that, gunshots, machine guns. I mean, I could tell you stories.
Early 80s, yeah, sure.
Mid 80s, yeah, it was insane. And I'm trying to unpack a little bit of that. So here's this, by all accounts, great American president, and he's talking about, kind of in a very proud way, a lot of braggadocio there, him and his son, count of how many lions and elephants and giraffes and, if you can believe, small, 1.5 foot tall black and white monkeys killed with an elephant gun. He called it his big stick. And I'm like, okay, I mean, this is one of the great American presidents. He's not one of the bad guys, right? And then I also try and unpack the idea, which I tease out through the book, is, kind of does every moon have a dark side?
Yeah.
Right. I talk about it, Churchill did that. So there's a lot of that going on, kind of interesting digressions, which are away from the main point of the story. I go to Hamarikyu Gardens and I imagine Tokyo. This is one of the things that I find quite unbelievable, this idea of, kind of history being written by the victors. I mean, kind of you've got, nobody talks about the firebombing of Tokyo. That is, in terms of loss of life, one night was more than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. People don't appreciate that. And, little things like that I kind of highlight along the way in the journey. To me, from a writing perspective, that was sort of important for me to get across. And there probably would have been a lot more of that if I'd had leeways, but there wouldn't be kind of life lessons of the type that you're talking about. It would be much more kind of, here's what I saw and here's what I would have liked to have talked more about.
But you relate it and you weave it in so well with somewhere in the lessons too. So, I mean, it's not gratuitous. It's there when you're describing. Obviously, it's written like a novel too, so it's super entertaining in that way. Yeah. Self-deprecating and cynical in many ways, being Alok. So it's beautiful. Yeah. Anyway, all right. So ready for rapid fire? We just have a few minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So number 1, you kind of touched on it, but it's okay. What's the first thought that crosses your mind when you wake up in the morning? And exclude right now you're in this book mode, but just in general.
It's probably something as hopelessly addictive as checking my Goodreads rating, right? It literally is. And I have
that's now. I'm saying exclude now because you're in a different time.
But it's something equally silly. It used to be, kind of messages from Masa-san. And before that, it was literally, as trivial as like, I had a Facebook post and how many likes they get. I mean, I really do think social media is an addiction, right? It
Of
really
course.
is. It's
Okay.
and it got to me. That usually is, sadly, tragically, is what I end up doing first thing
Okay.
in the morning. Some form of electronic engagement, which I will tell you, and knowing it's not unhealthy, which is why it's kind of a point worth making.
Okay. Most unexpected lesson. One lesson that life taught you, which you never saw coming.
It's a tough one. I actually genuinely don't have a good answer for that.
Okay.
I'll
You
come
can
back to it if
defer
I
or
think of something.
come back
Yeah.
if you want.
Yeah.
Defining act of courage. What's the bravest thing you've ever done that no one knows about?
I'm a wimp, man. I don't think I actually done anything courageous in my life. I mean, the closest would be what I did in terms of going to school, but people already know about that. It's difficult to talk about things that nobody knows about because you just wrote a memoir and you're supposed to have talked about everything
I mean, you
that
couldn't
is
talk about
important for people to
everything.
know about. Everything
Hopefully,
that's
there are
important
many.
to talk about. Everything that's important to talk about is out there.
You know what I'm saying is, you're going to hopefully have many books coming out of you.
But there won't be memoirs. There'll be fiction. It's just so much easier, man. There's
And
so
something,
the lack of accountability of fiction is really, really cool. I'm looking
and
forward to it.
there'll be other buried memoirs in you. You
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
even know. Okay.
yeah.
Do you have a personal ritual that keeps you centered? I think I asked you that, especially
Med-
during
it's,
chaotic
yeah.
times.
For me, it's meditation.
Meditation.
Absolutely. It really works for me. I could not recommend it more. Wow, it works for me.
Other than your own book, is there a book that reflects your personal journey?
Yes, and I touch on it in the title of my book, Lost Illusions Inside the Tech Bubble. The Lost Illusions refers to sort of my lost illusions, and it's a literary reference to French literary giant Balzac in his books called Lost Illusions.
Ah.
And if you don't have the patience to read that book, it's a wonderful book, but it is a long book and it is hard work. There's two movie versions and they're both worth watching. And it's this theme of a kid from rural France who's thrown into the world of Paris and money and power and how he deals with it. And I just relate to that at a personal level because that's a lot of what I experienced.
So who came up with the title of your book? There are other titles with Money Trap, other books out there with Money Trap as a title.
Yeah, there were a lot of books with the title Money Trap, but one of my writing gurus made a statement that I would never make, which is, look, I'm quite certain that if there's anyone who needs to be worried, it's the other people with that title. So we went with it. Anyway, it's a little bit cliched, the idea of a money trap. I was kind of persuaded because it rhymes with honey trap.
Yeah, but the subtitle is also,
the subtitle to me was my compromise, which is like, I want that in there. And the editors, everyone said, nobody knows what that means. And I said, it means something to me. I know what that means, and I want that in there.
Excellent. Okay, so is there a long-held belief that you recently questioned or let go of?
Certainly the belief that money and power give you any sense of control in terms of controlling, anything. I tease that. I'm sure you noticed this. I begin to tease it out in the opening of the book. Kind of money and power. I can barely control my own bladder, right? I mean, so to me, that's part of what comes with old. And it's amazing to me how friends of mine, CEOs, chairmen, who still kind of operate under the illusion that power, money, it's what makes the world go round. And you can be very cynical, and there is an element of truth, but I don't believe it. It just provokes. It's what I said. Kind of money doesn't buy you control; it buys you a nicer coat.
Exactly. So a question that somebody else asked you the other day, which I also ask usually: what's the best advice you've ever received?
Yeah, so it came from Vikram Pandit, who you will remember. He was a mentor, certainly to me and probably to you as well. He's president of Morgan Stanley and went on to be CEO of Citigroup. And we were in Mumbai and we were doing client calls. And I remember we were going into the Ambani offices and Maker Chambers, whatever it was. And Vikram went in and out of a room and he came out and it was the restroom and he said, look, if you've learned nothing else from me, remember this. When you're over 50, every time you walk by a restroom, just do it.
I think he gave me the same advice.
Did he? Okay, I've never forgotten that advice.
Yeah, don't pass up an opportunity to go to the restroom, no matter where you're going, if you're over
I'll give
50.
you something a little bit more philosophical, which is actually very cool too. And I'm saying this because you and I are old enough to, and maybe some of your listeners, if they're middle-aged, will remember this. You remember Dr. Ruth?
Of course. She
Okay,
just passed
sex
away, yeah.
therapist. Yeah, exactly. She passed away. Sex therapist,
Mhm.
yeah. She had a talk show. She was on radio, and
She's a
she
friend of a
was,
friend. Yeah, she
yeah,
just, yeah.
is he okay? 4 feet 7 inches. So
Yeah.
I want to say 91, 92. We were at the Lincoln Center. I was with a close friend of mine who used to work at Drexel Burnham Lambert, which has just gone bankrupt.
Uh-huh.
And we were there, and Dr. Ruth was there, and the two of us, along with our wives, just went and introduced ourselves. And my friend's name is Ravi, tells Dr. Ruth that, he's Drexel, you might have heard of it. Yes, how you doing? What do you do? Kind of very conversational, and said that, his company just got bankrupt. And she gave Ravi a piece of advice, which has stayed with me and has more or less worked out to me. He said, I'm going to tell you one thing, Dr. Ruth was 4 feet 7 inches, like literally every time no matter who she's talking to, Ravi was a short guy too, but towered over her. And she said, every time in my life I got kicked upward. That's a thought that has actually stayed with me. Whenever something bad has happened, I said, you know what? I think about that all the time.
That's a good one. I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
If you had to choose, I'm going to do this one more time. One thing. If you had to choose one word to describe what you hope for the future, what your future holds for you, what would that be?
Peace of mind. Still don't have it. And that goes back to the first question you asked me, which is who are you, right? Still searching. I mean, in a good place, but I'm still searching. There's still too much about. I should not be thinking about the ratings for my book. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I need to get to a place of mind where I've kind of completely locked myself out of that.
It's like taking an exam. You've done all the preparation. The exam is just, that stopping point. After that, you're done. You just don't have to.
Easier said
The
than
book is
done.
done. There's nothing you can do to change it now. So just let it go.
I'm just acknowledging a weakness, and I'm just, it is my hope that I can become strong enough to kind of just not get hung up on all the noise around me.
Okay.
Not think about what people say, what people think.
Well, all good things must come to an end. So I'm sorry that this I have to, be mindful of time. But I really, really appreciate you taking the time. I know I was one of the first ones to reach out to you. Please come on my podcast. That was a couple of months ago. But it's better late than never. And I really appreciate you taking the time.
No, man.
Your book is amazing. I hope it wins all kinds of accolades and awards and what have you, because you can then reaching out to more people to make the impact. I think that's what we're all here to do, in the hope that we touch people's lives in a way, the butterfly effect that you talk about as well. Right. I talk about that all the time. So that is the key. And I think, so I really appreciate you. And in the same vein of gratitude, Alok, is there anything that you discovered in this conversation in the last 50 minutes or so?
No, it was just cool hanging out with you, man. It's been a while.
Okay, so no new discoveries. Okay.
We should probably do that more often.
Well, we should. All right, well, thanks again, and wish you all the best with your book.
Thanks, man. Thanks, man.
Okay. Thank you, my friend, for tuning in to another episode of Bold Conscious Connections. If you really enjoyed this episode, give it a thumbs up, please, and subscribe for more inspiring stories and insights from top entrepreneurs and leaders. So that button is right below here. And also hit the notification bell, the thing next to subscribe, so you'll never miss another episode and any of our latest content that I post, usually every week. I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions, so drop them in the comments below. I would really love to hear more about what I'm doing and maybe bring you something that's more suitable for what you like and other things that you might want to learn about. So join our vibrant community of individuals who are out there making a difference. Okay? Stay tuned for more amazing conversation that will inspire and empower you. And until next time, remember, live boldly and consciously, my friend.